Hello, and welcome back to 100% Real with Ruby. So today I have on Aram, and he's one of those people that does not really filter what he says. He just lays it plain out there, and you can take it with a grain of salt, or you can be like, yeah, I hate you, because he kind of really spits the truth. Like, he puts the shit out there that a lot of people are missing, and it's the basics. It is seriously the basics. And the reason why I love him so much is because it is the basics. And as my mentor says, too many people can't walk and chew gum at the same time. So why are you throwing them a million things to try and add on to that when they can't even master the basics? And you can't really build a mansion on a matchstick foundation. So here we are with Aram, and I'm going to get him to introduce himself and talk about what he usually comes across with women in particular and what their biggest struggles are. Busy women, and even those that are literally thinking they're ticking off all the boxes, but they really aren't. So hello.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I'm sorry for what's going on over there, and I'm sorry that you're locked in your home, but hopefully soon enough you'll be out there enjoying some fresh air and, I don't know, a bar or a concert, who knows. So what are the things that women struggle with? It's a long list, unfortunately, and I think it's because the fitness industry preys on women almost, I want to say in a diabolical way, because women tend to be the most body conscious population. So I think the fitness industry does a very good job of attacking them and making sure that all of their marketing schemes are directed towards them, whether it's the pink bottles of protein or the women's specific vitamins or the women's specific workout groups. There's a lot of female dominated information that's hitting them at all angles. But at the end of the day, that's really unnecessary, because from a physiological standpoint, yes, women are different hormonally than we are, but that doesn't mean that they shouldn't train with weights, or they shouldn't eat protein, or they shouldn't go to bed at a reasonable hour, or they shouldn't drink water, or they shouldn't take steps. It just means that the approach needs to be tailor-made towards them. So opposition usually comes from, I don't want to lift heavy because I don't want to look like a man. I don't want to eat too much because I don't want to get too big, or I don't want to put on fat. I'm really, really busy, and prioritizing myself just really can't happen right now because I have too much going on. I can't be bothered with tracking food because it's another thing on my already busy plate. I'm not ordering those in any order of importance, but those are typically the four things that I see that tend to be the most problematic for females.
You actually raised a really good point with the fact that a lot of women are scared to actually lift heavy. But even if it's not the scared factor, it's they think they're training hard, but they don't really know what hard is, or they give up before that final push. And I put a recent post of me pulling the most disgusting faces into my inner circle the other day. And a couple of the girls commented saying, oh, I thought I pushed myself hard, and I do, because I do challenge myself, but now I'm realizing I actually drop, like I put the weights down, or I've realized that I struggle on the first set. So I just revert back to the easier weights for the rest of the sets. And like, yeah, the nutrition part is one of the biggest things I'm going to be touching on with you, but this training obstacle actually doesn't really get mentioned all that much, because we know that nutrition is a thing that holds a lot of people back from weight loss, but people are coming to us wanting to get toned. They don't realize you need to have the muscle there to then sculpt the muscle. And just touching on the fact that not that long ago, I was lifting 3 times my body weight with deadlifts, with squats, and I don't think you saw me looking like a bulky she-male. Like, no matter what type of training I did, I smashed myself in the gym. I was smashing myself and I was eating a lot, yet I still did not look like a she-male. And that was the message I was trying to put out. But how much of an obstacle is this really when people are not actually putting the intensity into the gym? Because I guess from another standpoint, there are so many, oh, this is better. Maybe this is the minimal effective dose. And then people are just barging about what's the best way to train instead of just pushing yourself.
I think it probably should, it really needs to start with a plan. And a lot of times that plan has to be devised based on what the actual goal is. So if you bring it back all the way and strip everything back and peel everything back, the individual needs to be very realistic about what their goal is, and they have to kind of forget about whatever timeline is in their head. So when I recommend anything to people, I always say, start with your goal first, whatever that may be. Understand that some goals can't be reached simultaneously. For example, if you have a fairly significant amount of experience lifting weights, you may not be able to grow muscle and lose fat simultaneously. You have a small finite window of time. That window of time is very not understood perfectly. So there's really not a good predictor of it. So let's call it anywhere between 1 to 5 years that you can sometimes, depending on your intensity and your nutrition, you may be able to gain muscle and lose fat simultaneously, but that will stop at some point. So be very specific with your goal. Once your goal is established, now be very specific with what your exercise regimen will look like. That usually will depend on how many days a week you plan on training. So for example, if you know you only have 3 days a week to get into the gym, that means that you're probably going to be doing full body all those 3 days. If you have 4 days to go to the gym, that may be more upper body, lower body twice a week. If you have 5 days to go to the gym, that's going to change, 6, so on and so forth. So once, you start at the top, which is your goal, then your frequency, then your split, and then within your split, now you start to choose your exercises based on what you're trying to achieve. So it's kind of like having go ahead.
It's a question for
it's kind of like being a worker and having a toolbox. You have to be well versed in all the tools, but you have to know what each tool does and what the specific use of that tool is. So for example, you walk into a public gym and there's 95 leg machines. Do you have to use all 95 in order to get results? No, I like to pick the ones that make me feel where I'm supposed to feel it the most. And I forget that the other ones exist because I don't need them. If I know that I can use a hack squat to bias my quads and develop my quads the most, that's where I'll spend more of my time using that machine for its specific purpose. If I know that I can use a hamstring curl seated to build up my hamstrings more, that's the machine I'll bias for hamstrings. So once you get an understanding of what your goal is, and then you understand what machines will drive you towards your goal or what exercises will drive you towards your goal, now you're left with understanding how many sets do I do, how many reps do I do, and how many times a week should I do it. Science suggests anywhere between 12 to 24 working sets per muscle group per week. That's going to vary very greatly depending on what intensity you use. There was a bodybuilder back in the day named Dorian Yates. He claimed to do only one working set of a body part, and that was enough for him. Now, when you watched him train, 6 reps to him looked like he was giving birth. So the intensity was super, super high. Your average human being that's walking into a gym is not going to exhibit that level of intensity, nor will they ever really realize what that looks like because they've never even seen it. So when I train folks, I usually give them a rep range just as a kind of a framework, like no less than this, no more than this. But I kind of want you to empty out the tank every single time. So if I tell you to do a shoulder press for 15 reps and you hit 15, but you have 20 or 22 left, realistically in you, go for it. As long as the risk of injury is low and you know when that risk of injury tipping point is, which comes with experience. So I'm not going to tell that to a novice. A novice, I may tell them, leave 1 or 2 reps left in the tank. For somebody more experienced, I may say, go until you have to drop the weight. So it's really context specific. It's really individually specific, but we all can push ourselves harder. I just got back from the gym. I was doing seated rows. I know I stopped at 11 reps on one set, I probably could have gotten 13. Now, that one session is not going to make a difference. But by cumulatively leaving 2 or 3 reps on the table every single time I work out, that will create a gap between where I'm at and where I want to be.
I love the fact you ended on that note as well, because I'm victim to it as well. Like, I know that I have more in the tank, and sometimes I just leave it there because that's fine. And people put too much weight on one single session. Maybe you can't for that session actually physically do as much as you usually do. That's okay as well. And I guess the point of all of what we're trying to say here is you usually have a lot more in the tank than you think. Challenge yourself, even if it's just in the last set. Even if it's just in the last set, you actually take, because I usually give rep ranges. Sometimes I give a set number and I want them to actually be within that and increase the weight if they're finding it easy. But why not on the last set, see how many more you can do. And then you'll be like, oh, okay, so maybe I can actually increase the weight. And yeah, take yourself to technique failure, not actual form failure, because you don't want to lose a form, but you want to actually take yourself to the point where it's too much. And I guess this falls, one last thing I wanted to touch on with the training, where you mentioned the whole, like, the fact that we're getting our goals clear. Don't get married to exercises. And I hate it when people say, is that better than this? Is this better than that? Okay, what are your goals? What are you realistically doing right now? Where about is it in your program? Because yeah, the hack squat is way better than the squat at the end of my workout when I'm trying to still get everything in, because I don't have that fatigue at the, like, that I would have being at the end of my workout, that I need to actually do a proper squat. And if my goal, because there was a period of time I hardly squatted, I was doing a lot of single leg kind of stuff. I was doing a lot of machine work because my goal was to get really big legs. And yeah, the squat's great for that, but I can't overload it the same way that I can overload a machine. So you need to get your goals clear. Don't get so married to exercises. And I guess the one last thing I wanted you to kind of really emphasize is group fitness, because you did a really good post on that not that long ago. But we get targeted to group fitness. We get targeted to this huffy puffy training, this circuit training. As soon as someone says, I want to lose fat, they're like, I need to get my heart rate up. I need to actually feel like I'm working out. And as soon as, like, people that are so used to this junk volume come to me and they're like, I feel good after my workout. I didn't push myself enough. I'm like, you're supposed to feel good after a workout. Yeah, maybe you could push yourself more, but you're supposed to feel good after a workout, not like you're dragging your ass on the floor.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea of group fitness was created because of, obviously, price point limitations, because not everybody could afford a $120 an hour personal trainer. And when you start to lower the price point, it becomes accessible to more people. So now you can be in a group setting. It doesn't require as much equipment. So the logistics of the group fitness environment is a lot easier for a gym or a group of trainers to come up with, because they don't need to invest as much money in a facility. And it is billed to be available for all shapes, sizes, ages, and abilities. So if you're somebody who's never worked out before and you go to a group fitness class, that's probably not a bad place to start to at least get yourself moving, but also understand that you're a victim to the ability of that trainer or that group fitness instructor. So if they have 25 people in a class and you just showed up, are they going to be able to truly give you as much attention as you need as a novice to make sure that you don't break down, to make sure that your form is solid, to make sure that your biomechanics are in tune, that you don't get yourself hurt? So there is benefit and there's cost. As you start to progress as an individual and as your training age grows, so you go from novice to intermediate to advanced, group fitness really just becomes cardio for you. And that's really all it is. It's you're moving fast in between sets. The weights aren't heavy enough to be significant to overload the muscle tissue. There's not enough tissue damage being created to force an adaptation, which is either growth or strength or both. So, you know, I have a lot of people that use group fitness as a cardio tool because they don't like getting on a treadmill or they don't like getting on a rower. So they'll do 45 minutes of a group fitness class twice a week understanding that it's their cardiovascular exercise. It's not their bread and butter muscle building, metabolic conditioning stuff that they're doing when they're going to the gym. When they're going to the gym, they're following a 3 or a 4 or a 5 day constructed split where they're trying to damage muscle tissue and not trying to get their heart rate skyrocketed. Obviously, you know, a set of 10 heavy squats will get you redlining in the 190s, 200 heart rate zone. Almost the same as if you were doing a 15-second sprint on a treadmill. 2 totally different responses that the body's going to have. So also understanding that, yes, group fitness is a good start. It's a good way to dip your toes in the water, but understand that you will grow out of it at some point, and I hope you do. And then once you grow out of it, understand that now there's a way to progress your ability, and you can still stay in that environment, but know that you're going to need something more.
Yep. If you want to get the toned muscle that you guys want, group fitness isn't the place for you. It, like you said it exactly the way that I tell my girls, like, if you enjoy it, cool, that's your cardio, that's your hit, but you can't use that as weights, even if there's weights involved, because it is not the same thing. Now, with all that being said, I cannot wait to dig into this, because it's probably the most important thing when it comes to really getting that look that you want, because if you're not giving your muscles the nourishment that they need, which is in the form of amino acids, which AKA is protein, well, Aram and I go on and on about the importance of protein on our pages. And I am actually a proponent of the higher protein approach, myself being on like 3 times my body weight, but I usually push for like at least 2 as a minimum grams per kilo body weight, and pushing it high towards the 2.5 if you are kind of carrying a little bit more fat than you should, just because it's got a higher thermic effect, as in it burns a lot more calories to break down, it satisfies you more, and it actually makes you think about your food, because it is not easy to just grab protein off the shelves. You actually need to prep it. And by making protein a focus as a higher percentage of your diet, everything else can fit around that. And all of a sudden you're not craving as much, because I remember reading a study, maybe you can elaborate on this as well, that your body will always feel like it needs to keep eating if it has not had sufficient amino acids in its system. And if you're stressed out as an individual, and a lot of women are, they don't put themselves first, like you said, you're going to be eating away at the amino acids more than you realize. So I guess you can dig into this very deep about how the higher protein approach can really help, and how just the simple choice of placing protein as the main focus of a meal can honestly take individuals' bodies that much further, especially women.
So I think where this should start is understanding that most people, and I'm sure that we could say this about whatever country we're in, whether it's Australia, the United States, is I don't know that we're so much over fat as a world. I think we're probably more under muscled. And Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, I don't know if you follow her on Instagram. She's great. She says that all the time. And I couldn't say it better myself. We don't have, like, BMI is a horrible indicator of overall health and body composition. So understand what protein's role in health and wellness is. Protein and the breakdown of protein creates an amino acid pool. And this is a perfect segue on getting into veganism or not and stuff like that. So when you eat enough protein, those pools of amino acids inside of your body build up, and it prevents those pools from depleting. Amino acids are the building block of every chemical reaction that occurs within the body. So if you don't have enough of those things, you're not going to be operating efficiently as a human being. So if you strip down everything to its bare basics, the way that your body works is by feeding and utilizing amino acids. The one thing I will say when it comes to protein, I find that I like using ranges. So when I give somebody a pinpoint number, all my type A people are like, I gotta hit 190 grams to the T, or else the devil's coming for me. I like to tell people hit 85 to 90% of it, because one day you'll be high, one day you'll be low. It'll kind of balance out on average throughout the week. So that's an easier way to do it. You're never going to get punished for eating more than you should have as far as protein is concerned. I think there's probably been multiple studies now that have concluded that if you overeat protein and that's the way that you go into a calorie surplus, even then you're not putting on fat because of the thermic effect of that food. Now, I've never seen somebody sit down to a plate of grilled chicken and be like, oh, I can't wait to finish all of it and overeat this. It's much easier to sit down in front of a bag of chips in front of the television and mindlessly go and go and go. Once the T-bone steak of 10 ounces is sitting in front of you, it's going to be very hard to overeat that T-bone steak and then want another one for most average human beings.
It's almost like those eating contests. Like you don't see them having eating contests of a friggin' T-bone steak and a whole grilled chicken breast. It's always like the pizzas, the burgers, the fries. So like literally it is that hard to just over consume protein.
It is. And I think because so many people underconsume it, using that as your number one source of nutrients and calories first allows you to then trickle down into the fats and the carbs. Now, understanding what protein is, most of the time I'm recommending people get it from animal sources. It's always usually going to have some type of a fat load attached to it. So let's peel back for even another second, just so people understand what protein does. When a muscle tears during exercise, because that's what you're doing, is you're creating a small tear in each muscle fiber. What protein does is it reties that bond between the fibers, and having enough protein ensures that happens. So people have this idea that if they eat too much protein, they'll bulk up. Like I hear this from women a lot. Like, I don't want to eat too much protein because I'll get too big, because protein and protein powder is usually associated to bodybuilding, and bodybuilding for most women has a negative connotation because that's going to create bulk. What really bulks up a muscle is carbs, because that's where, when carbs break down, they break down into glucose. Glucose in its stored form inside of the muscle tissue is glycogen. That's what volumizes the muscle cell. So really, if I was to eat no carbs and very little fats and a ton of protein, I would not look this big. I would not have muscle tissue this size, because I just wouldn't be able to keep it on. And it's because there would be no actual volume inside the tissue. Yes, I'd be able to repair it, but I wouldn't be able to actually volumize it and create size. So what that protein does is it's tying that bond. Where you're getting it from is going to depend on what you prefer. You can very much eat in a vegan manner and be okay. The problem with eating in a vegan manner is that you are going to have to also ingest a lot of carbohydrates with your protein sources. Because typically, from what I understand, the only singular source of vegetable protein that's a complete protein, meaning it has all of the amino acids that your body requires, is soy. So if you're going to eat nothing but soy, then you'll be okay. But most people don't want to eat nothing but soy if they're vegan. So they're going to eat different types of other protein sources for brown rice, peas, and other types of starchier or carbier things. So if you're somebody who's weight conscious, is veganism the most efficient way to get your protein? I'm going to argue it's not. It's much easier to get 3 ounces of grass-fed beef and get 25 grams of protein out of this much food volume versus having to eat a cup of rice and a cup of beans and then a half a cup of some other vegetable. Put that all together. Now you're taking up a ton of room in your stomach. You're also probably putting in another 40 or 50 grams of carbs on top of that. So it just becomes it's like going to a jewelry store and buying an engagement ring with change when you have a credit card in your pocket. Just use the credit card. It's a lot easier to do that than to roll a wheelbarrow in full of quarters and dimes and then say, this is how I'm going to pay. You can do it. It's still legal tender. It works. It's just a pain in the ass. The body's going to have to fight to break all that down. What I think a lot of people ignore in the health and wellness space now is gut health. I find that protein, when people's guts are not used to breaking down a lot of protein, not that I'm demonizing or saying what you're saying is wrong. I usually start small and build them up, because if I have a woman or a man who's used to eating 100 grams based on what they've tracked for their initial tracking with me, I can't go from 100 to 180 and expect their stomach to be okay. I just can't.
I actually agree with that on so many levels, because one of the biggest things that we are seeing today is a decline in gut health. And it's not coming from freaking the toxin that did this and the thing that's in your liver and the thing that's in your unicorn blood, whatever. Like, we are getting more stressed as a society, and your gut is like, it cannot tolerate stress. It starts to become, I hate to use the word leaky, but it starts to become leaky. Like the actual gut barrier, starts to pull apart. And protein is one of the hardest things, as we said, to digest, this is where I really start to push, okay, let's eat some more white fish. It is easier to digest. Let's mince up your meat, have it pre-digested. Let's chew your food more. Let's eat with apple cider vinegar, because then that's going to help your stomach acid. Like, there are things that you can do to improve the digestibility of things so that you aren't having so much trouble. But then on that other note as well, when I was going through I wasn't stressed. My body was stressed because of all the training I was doing. I couldn't tolerate the 220 grams of protein that I was actually eating back then. But I had to drop it down to 160, which I only had to do for a week. And by then, my stomach actually was able to then pick it up again. I was actually really hungry then, and all I wanted to eat was food. And that's just what protein does. It helps with the satisfaction of it all. So I'll let you carry on with all these things.
Well, no, and I think that's interesting, because if you don't mind me asking, how much do you weigh?
56 kilos.
56 kilos, so about 115 pounds, 120 pounds. So were you that size when you were eating 220 grams of protein?
I was 57 kilos.
Okay. So, I think there's a lot of misconception between how much protein your body can actually utilize. And I think when you realize that a woman that's as small as you can eat that much protein, I mean, I eat 210 grams a day. I'm 225 pounds. So I'm over 100 kilos. So I'm double your size. And at one point, we were eating the same amount of protein. So ladies, the body can handle it if you allow it to. You just have to be used to doing it. It's very easy, and I see this all the time on weekends, right? A lot of my females complain, this is so much food, I'm so full all the time. And then I immediately say to them, well, you had no problem with the cheese board on Saturday. You ate a half a loaf of bread and you drank 2.5 bottles of wine. So clearly you have the stomach capacity for it. You're just not used to eating that much protein. That's what you're not used to eating.
I actually have a girl who, it has nothing to do with the protein, but she was struggling to get in like a healthy meal. She's like, this is too much food. It was a mental thing. And then she's like, is this accurate for Subway? She showed me a MyFitnessPal breakdown. I'm like, nah, it looks like you're putting in the footlong. You need to pick a smaller piece of bread. And she's like, nah, I'm getting a footlong. I'm like, wait a minute. The meal that you just complained about was a quarter of the size, but you can eat a whole footlong? Like, and I actually just want to sum up one more thing that you said with the protein. Like, it is like, it's not just for building muscle, and eating too much does not make you bulky. Like, look at me and look at I still eat 195 grams of protein a day, and I'm not this big elephant. Like, it does not bulk you up. And we're going to go into soon, after we go into this part of protein, how it goes beyond the muscle, because protein isn't just for muscle. It's enzymes that are also metabolism. So I'll let you keep going.
No, I mean, it's when I categorize food in general, I say usually from a metabolic standpoint, calories are king. That's what the number of calories you eat per day kind of dictate what your metabolic health and flexibility will be. Right behind that is protein consumption. And then carbs and fats are very individually specific. If you were to say that there was two universal truths in nutrition, It's calories are king and protein is queen. And then you can basically start to argue between fats and carbs depending on the individual. So that's why I think in the fitness and the nutrition business, everybody's always barking and yelling protein, 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 because that's the one thing we understand definitively that's going to help everybody. And we understand that if you're fuller, you're not going to eat bullshit. If you're prioritizing protein on your plate, you're not going to have room for the other crap you might want to eat. If you're prioritizing protein, you're going to get more of the nutrients that you need. If you're prioritizing protein, you're going to be rebuilding bonds and creating chemical reactions. So there's a lot of cascading good effects. It's, again, goes back to not being able to overeat a lot of it. You can give somebody a plate of fats and a plate of starches, or usually those are combined. Very easy to overeat that stuff. Most of your bagged baked goods, most of your sweets, most of your savory snacks, what are they? They're carbs and fats, or carbs and simple sugars. And that's it. That's why those things are so easy to eat and never stop eating them, because they're creating a signal in your brain saying, don't stop eating me because this is so tasty. So you can't really eat protein hedonistically. I mean, I guess you can, listen, I love steak. I love red meat. I could sit down and eat a 40-ounce T-bone and enjoy the hell out of it. But at some point, I'm going to get tired of eating it. And then I'm not going to have room for mashed potatoes. And I'm not going to have room for creamed spinach. And I'm not going to have room for cheesecake. So I strategically stop eating 40 ounces of steak to make room for everything else that I want to eat.
I think with the anomaly, I think that's the word, anomaly, that would actually easily just demolish a whole table worth of protein. Like there was one point in one day that I hit 350 grams of protein because I went somewhere for charcoal chicken, and I can just eat charcoal chicken. Like my stomach will be full and I'll just eat it. But there was dessert. I didn't even want dessert. I wanted more charcoal chicken. Like they had dessert. I'm like, can I just have more charcoal chicken? Like I would argue that once you actually get adapted to it, you would have less cravings for the sugary shit. Because I don't crave anything. I've never craved a thing. And
Really?
no, I don't crave anything. Like I don't know the last time I ate chocolate. Like there'd be chocolate. I'd go to eat something. I'm like, I actually don't want that. Like, and then I'm going to be cooking pizza for my parents today when I go out, but I don't actually want the pizza. I'd rather have my bowl of oats. Like, I don't know. It's really weird.
I mean, let's be very honest. You're an anomaly. You're not the average. And I would say even in the fitness space, you're probably not the average, because I think a lot of people that do what we do, you know, there's a reason why cheat meals exist, because cheat meals were created by the bodybuilding community to reward themselves for massively restrictive protocols. So when you're spending 18 weeks in a diet and you're done with your show, the first thing you can think of is a burger and a piece of cake and ice cream and chips and cookies. For me, I never am going to be a bodybuilder. I know that I like those types of foods. I like to pair salty and sweet. That is tasty to me. I don't do it. That's not my average decision. Most of the time I'm eating fairly bland foods. I'm eating really quantity-based foods based on what my nutritional requirements are. But I always save room for myself to savor food, because I do enjoy eating, and eating to me is an experience. I don't want to take the pleasure away from cake. I don't want to take the pleasure away from cookies. But I also don't want to depend on them psychologically for just nothing but pleasure. And I don't want it to be a reward system that I have to earn those types of foods. If I say I want to go get a cookie, I'm 37 years old. I'm going to go eat a cookie. But I know the consequences of making that decision more often than not.
I love
and that's what I think your average person is going to make that as their average decision. And they're going to say, well, one cookie's not going to harm me. No, but one cookie every single day, or one cookie a couple times a day, every single day, will add up. And if you're doing that, what are you not doing? So I never want to be restrictive with people. If anything, more protein, more veggies, more good carbs, more good fats. And then if and when you feel like you need some of those things, okay, have them.
I think that's the biggest thing that separates us from most of the other coaches and fitness people, as well as clients and just general people, because yeah, cravings exist, but they're not to do with anything freaking lacking magnesium, freaking lacking this shit, that shit. No, it's a psychological thing, it's a physical thing, it's a physiological thing, it's all of these different things, because the majority of people live in a state of deprivation, restriction, lack. They live in a state of, I need to diet, I need to focus on this outcome. Whereas I haven't, well, except for when I had to run a half marathon like forever ago, when I was in that phase, I had to go down, I had to diet. I was literally dieting on 2,300 calories then, but I had to diet. That was less. I only had to drop down 300 calories to do that. I wasn't severely restricting. But when people go through these severe restrictions, and I actually want you to just rub that bullet wound in with the cheat meals before we go back to protein, because I love it. People always start something and then ask, okay, so when can I fit in a cheat meal? When can I fit in this? It's like, wait a minute. You want to create changes that you can keep as a life thing. Like, you want to keep these results for life? So why aren't you thinking at it from a life perspective instead of this now? When's the cheat meal? When's my results? Why is the scale doing this? Like, you need to view it for life if it is a life thing. But also, if you're thinking of it from such a restriction mindset, of course you're going to have cravings. Of course you're going to say, oh, I wish I could eat bread, or I wish I could eat this. Like, yeah, there are times, there are times where you need to go hard for a few weeks, not for your whole life and be a consistent dieter year after year after year. No, you diet hard for 4, 6, 8 weeks with like a couple of diet breaks if you're going for the 8 weeks, depending where you start from. If you're over fat, you can keep going, but you diet for a period of time, not for a lifetime. And then you spend a lot of time living at maintenance, because then you can actually restore your mental well-being and your relationship with food, and then you're not sabotaging that anymore. So with cheat meal, he has this post, it's actually on my screen, I love it. Cheat meals for average folks are silly. You've most likely been cheat mealing your whole damn life. So I'll let you go into that part and then swivel back into the protein.
So I think human beings are basically just the sum total of their average decision-making process. So if your average decision-making process is, I'm going to eat out twice a day, 7 days a week, and I'm not going to control my intake, and I have no control over my intake because I'm eating out, you have to be making really good decisions when you eat out. 9 out of 10 times when people walk into a restaurant, they're not sitting and looking at the menu and saying, what's going to make me feel the best? It's going to be what tastes the best and what do I want right now? So if that's your average decision when you're eating emotionally and you're eating hedonistically for pleasure. You're not eating for function. You're not eating to fuel. You're not eating to nourish. Now, it doesn't mean never have anything bad ever again. Never have a burger, never have a beer, never have a piece of cake. But if you've been living on average off of those types of foods, and if I was to ask you and say, what's an average day look like? And you say pancakes for breakfast and a fried chicken sandwich for lunch, and then a T-bone steak and mashed potatoes for dinner with a dessert, we probably have to peel some stuff back. I can't be allowing that type of behavior to continue when you're telling me that you want results in X amount of time, because it's just not going to happen. Now, understanding that we can plug those types of foods in strategically to have some mental buy-in and at least a little bit of relaxation here and there to keep you in the game, that's appropriate. But just understand that if your favorite Instagram model has abs all year round and that's what you want to look like, you're probably not going to be eating out really for a while. And you're probably not going to be eating cakes, and you're probably not going to be eating burgers, and you're probably not going to be consuming alcohol. But if you're an average person with average goals, like I want to just feel a little bit better than I used to, I want to get my blood pressure down a little bit more. I want to have a cleaner blood lab next time I go into the doctor's office. And I want to shed a couple pounds. That person doesn't need to be on some crazy restrictive protocol that's going to deprive them of all of their hedonistically favorite foods. But as your goal intensifies and your aesthetic goal especially intensifies, you have to be very, very careful about what you consume, because all of these foods that are tasty and delicious carry a very large calorie load and carry a lot of things with it, such as fats and sugars, that your body is not going to cooperate with, and it's not going to nourish, but it's going to deplete other things. So I think when I say I don't want people cheat mealing, it's because it's creating a negative feedback loop of healthy food. So what you're assuming is that the only way that I'll be able to really eat and taste my food is by eating like shit, as opposed to I can have a poke bowl and that's pretty tasty, and it's actually got nourishment in it because it's got protein, it's got a good starch, and it's got vegetables in it. I can eat a salad with the dressing on the side with protein in it, and I don't have to douse it in bullshit dressing because that's what makes it taste good. So you can still eat tasty food that's also not blowing the bank out when it comes to calories. But I think people have this image of like, no, I have to eat nothing but kale chips and nothing but boiled white chicken and nothing but tuna out of a can. No, that's not how it works. If you're a competitor and that's what you have to do to get on stage, sure. But if you're Susan and John average, you don't have to eat like that. Just understand that there are better choices than what you've been making.
That's actually a really important part to mention too, because yeah, you like, it's not the fact that you can't have it, because you can have whatever the hell you want. It's should you have it for your current state. Yeah, you can have it, but should you? And with every choice you make, there's going to be a consequence or something you have to give up. Like, yeah, you can eat the cookie, but you're going to be sacrificing satiety. You're going to be sacrificing satisfaction. Well, yeah, satiety, not satisfaction, because you're going to be satisfied with the cookie, but not satisfied in the way that a big meal will give you. It's realizing that if you're in a diet with really low calories at the moment, maybe it's not a wise idea to go fit in a poke bowl, which has 600 odd calories. Maybe it's better to actually go the salad route. But then if you want to get the poke bowl, then maybe you need to actually strip back on what you're eating throughout the day, ensure you still get enough protein, but you still need to get yourself into a balance where you can fit in that poke bowl. And if you can't, then you can fit the calories over 2 days or 3 days. But I usually suggest not going over that, because you don't want to be someone that freaking restricts like an asshole for Monday to Friday. And then on the weekends, you're blowing out bloody 4,000 calorie days and wondering why you're actually gaining weight. Well, no shit. Your body feels like all of a sudden it needs to cling on to what it's clinging on to. So then on the weekend, it feels like it needs to cling on to everything that it didn't get during the week. And the way that I view cheat meals, which is why I love that post so much, is why cheat? Why do you want to cheat a diet? What's there to cheat? Because a diet literally just refers to a nutritional plan. This is for life. This is something where you should factor in foods you like. If you want a chocolate, it's called a chocolate. It's not called a treat. If you want ice cream, it's not called a cheat meal. It's called ice cream. Call it what it is. Fit it into your day. There is better for you. There is worse for you. There's probably bad, like to me, what a bad food is something high in trans fats. That's literally the only thing that I consider a bad food, something high in trans fats. But every choice has a consequence. If you're going to eat a high amount of trans fats, expect really bad gut lining, really bad body system functioning, and really bad mood, really bad everything, because you're going to feel like shit after it because you're doing it consistently. So back to the whole protein thing, why do we need to realize that protein goes beyond muscle? Like there's hair, there's enzymes, there's metabolism. There are so many things that protein is good for that you literally cannot fuck this shit up. It's simple. Protein. Like,
no, I mean, I again, it's if you're focusing on that as your main source of food when you look down on your plate, and I always think that singular ingredients are best. Like I kind of I eat very much differently than the average person does. What I do is when I prep all my protein and I container and I put it in the fridge. So like after we're done with this podcast, I'll go eat a 10-ounce portion of ground beef. And then that's my protein and fat for that meal. And then I'll probably eat some white rice on the side as another sort, as a source of starch. Those are my carbs. So I don't mix things together, because I don't feel like it, and that's just my personal choice. Does that mean that I'm going to eat the same way when I go to a restaurant? Like I'm going to pour the rice onto a plate and move it to the side? No. But when I eat at home, that tends to be how I just eat because it's easier for me. So I've been programmed to think of foods in their original state and what they correspond to from a macronutrient standpoint. So when I look at beef in a package, I'm looking at protein and fat. When I look at rice in a container, I'm looking at carbohydrates. When I'm looking at vegetables, I'm looking at something that's going to fill my stomach up and give me micronutrients. So I look at things singularly. And I think when you start to think in those ways, it takes away the need to be all razzle dazzle with your meals. Like, you see all these things on Instagram, like recipes for this and make this interesting and find the healthy version of this. Like, let's not reinvent the wheel and make things all complex and crazy and make casseroles and soups and all these mixtures of stuff. Like, put a piece of protein on your plate, put some vegetables that you like on a plate, flavor them however you'd like, put a starch source on your plate, eat it, and then see how you feel. I guarantee you that when you eat in that way, you're going to feel full enough and you're going to feel really good. And you're not going to feel like you just swallowed the kitchen sink. So that's why I like to have people eat in that way. It doesn't mean don't make a salad. It doesn't mean don't eat soup. It doesn't mean don't have pie. It doesn't mean don't have pancakes. It just means that all in all, when you're looking at all of your meals collectively, however many times a day you eat, times however many days a week you eat, try to make 80 to 90% of your plates look like that. And then every once in a while you can deviate. That's it. It's that simple.
I love that whole concept because people are always saying, oh, but how do you make this? I can't think of a recipe for this. How do you put these together? It's like, just put the ingredients together. Like, you just take the chicken, you take whatever, but like, you just use all the ingredients and just throw them together and flavor them however you want. People complicate it so much, and it's just like, why are you doing this to yourself? You don't need to waste all this time adding in a million like freaking ingredients to something. Like, yeah, you can do it, but like you said, 80 to 90% of your meals, make them freaking simple. Like, seriously. And it doesn't mean,
right? Like, I think everybody associates food to like a name, like chicken parmesan, lasagna, pizza. Like, you don't have to categorize your food. It could just be, this is meal one and it's comprised of this 3 things. This is meal 2 and it's comprised of these 3 things. It doesn't have to have some specific country origin or name. If you like Asian flavorings, put a little bit of soy sauce on it. If you like Italian flavorings, put a little oregano on it. It does. If you like Spanish flavorings, put some salsa on it. I don't care how you flavor it. That's up to you. Don't douse it in cream and butter, and don't douse it in oil so you're not getting a ton of fat. Otherwise, you're fair game. It's really not that hard.
I actually am trying to put together like a little, I don't know what to call it yet, but I'm putting together like a little collection of recipes. But it's what it's going to be is, hey, look, I just threw in some beef. I just threw in a sauce of vegetables. I just threw in, well, I didn't throw it in. It's like, well, here's the veggies. Here's more veggies. Here's more veggies. Here's the protein. I also added in this spice, and I added in this low calorie flavoring to it, plus some tomato paste. What is it? It's like an accumulation of veggies in a pan with one source of protein, one flavoring thing. Tomato paste, I would say, is also a flavoring thing. And then if you want, add the carbs at the end and serve with it. But hey, I guess the flavoring thing was a curry, so maybe I might call it beef curry. Sure. It doesn't need to have a name, but it's meal one. People don't like, people overthink the process of creating a meal. You have this amount of veggies to have on your plate. Throw them in. Pick out of your sources of protein that are on the list. throw it in. Pick whatever dressing that you want, whatever flavoring you want that is low calories, throw it in. If you want, add in the herbs, add in the spices. You can't fuck it up. It is that simple. And if you add in a lot of veggies, add in a lot of your protein, and get to choose whatever flavors you want. You can create the same meal a million ways over. One day, green beans, one day, broccoli, one day, cauliflower, like one day beef, one day chicken, one day fish, one day calamari. Like there are so many ways to make a simple meal. You don't need to complicate it. And it's literally that simple. So we haven't yet touched on carbs, but I really want to touch on this because I don't want people to leave thinking that it makes you fat, because you did say it volumizes and bulks up a muscle. And I really want you to dig into the fact that carbs are not evil. It is a sliding scale. Some people do amazing on high carb. I can't remember. The other day, I was like, I'm looking flat. Like I'm looking like my belly didn't have my abs. It was looking bleh. I'm like, I think I didn't have enough. Well, I didn't have enough carbs this week. I'm on lower carbs. So I realized that my belly didn't look hard. Like that's what carbs do. They can actually make your muscle look harder. And it wasn't until I actually went from 3 years ago, I was on 160 grams of carbs. I eventually built my way up to 350 grams of carbs. My body looked like I got jacked up. Like I was lean and shredded, more so than when I looked watery, fat, and flat with less carbs. So it's not the carbs that are making you look fat. It's just an overconsumption of the calories, but the fact that carbs are the ones that make the muscles look full. Hence why my belly the other day looked really watery and bleh. And I was like, I need to up my carbs. And I considered low carb 300 grams. And it just flew my mind. I'm like, yeah, I'm on low carbs this week. Someone asked me what I was on, I'm like 300. She's like, how's that low? I'm like, I didn't think of that. But yeah, I'll let you.
Not low. I mean, the reality is that if you understand what carbohydrates are, you don't have to be afraid of them. Now, when people say carbs, they're not thinking sweet potatoes and jasmine rice. They're thinking of chips, cookies, and crackers. So yeah, are those carb sources? Yeah, they are. Are they optimal carb sources? I would say no, they're not. Those carb sources aren't coming with any load of fiber. They're coming with a lot of simple sugars. They're coming with a lot of sugars usually and a lot of fats. People also have to understand that if they are over fat and under muscled, that carbohydrates probably aren't going to be their most optimal fuel source, because they're probably in a state of metabolic and insulin resistance. And if their body is already circulating a ton of insulin and glucose, do they need to add more to the melting pot? Probably not. So what I typically see, and this is what I've seen in the last 4 years of doing this, men, even when they're over fat, can handle more carbs than women. I don't understand why. It's probably because of the hormonal structure of men and women. It's probably because we have more testosterone than women do. And usually when you're over fat, you're usually going to be estrogen dominant anyway. But even if a man is estrogen dominant, he still has more testosterone than a woman does. So he probably has a little bit more muscle than if there was the same woman in the same body composition does. So I think hormonally, men are just built more efficiently to handle carbohydrates. It doesn't mean that they need to eat more of them than a woman does. So what I notice is that if a woman is strength training with some intensity a few times a week at least, I can probably get them to grow muscle with more fats and more protein and a little bit less carbs if they're in some state of a surplus. Now, understanding what a surplus is individual to each person. That's going to be a range of calories where you're allowed to actually grow muscle. That's pure growth. You're probably going to get a little bit of water retention and also some fat gain if you're growing in general. Women can also recomp and change the structure of their body depending on how many calories they're eating and depending on those macronutrient splits. Carbs get a bad name, again, because I think people associate them to hedonistic foods. Ice cream is a carb and a fat source. Cookies are a carb and a fat source. If you're sitting down and you're eating a half a cup of white rice, those are essential starches that your body probably will need at some point, because even just your brain alone operates off of anywhere between 60 to 100 grams of glucose a day. Everything that you eat as outside of fruit, that's a carb, breaks down into glucose. So you do need it. Now, your body has mechanisms in place to create glucose if you don't ingest it. This is where the idea of keto comes into place, right? So if somebody's eating almost no carbs at all, their body will take other macronutrients and, through a very complicated and last-ditch effort, create carbohydrates and create glucose. That's a fail-safe that your body has because it's absolutely getting nothing else. That's not a good or healthy state to be in. When you're so deprived of carbohydrates that your body has to break down other nutrients and tissue to create carbohydrates, that means that you're on its last leg. That was a fail-safe when we had no food available to us because we were in a ditch because we were getting chased by dinosaurs. That's not a healthy state of being. Some people say that they lose a ton of weight on keto. Of course you lose a ton of weight on keto because A, you're cutting out an entire food source, and B, you're cutting out a food source that retains a lot of water. It's called a carbohydrate for a reason. So I think the accepted state is 1 gram of carbs retains 3 grams of water, something around there. So add that up. 20 grams of carbs is going to be 60 grams of water. That's a significant amount of weight. And if you're eating that every single day, expect there to be some water retention if you're not flushing that out. But you need carbs as an energy source. If you want to grow muscle, if you want to harden your muscle, if you want to volumize and repair muscle, if you need energy, that's where you're going to derive that energy from.
I also want to touch on the gut health again because it's such a big topic. If you want to have a healthy gut, you need to eat carbs because they feed the good bacteria in your gut. You need to actually give your body starches. Yeah, fiber. Like there needs to be resistant starch there. There needs to be fiber like given to the gut. There needs to be the probiotics and prebiotics, which, hey, you actually find those in carbs. So you need to stop viewing different foods as good or bad, but is this right for me at the moment? Because there was one girl that I had literally on 45 grams leading into one of her comps. She, like you said, under muscled, 45 grams of carbs, but she was on like 70 grams of fat. And she's the only person that I've ever put on low carbs. And that was the only way that her body changed because she was under muscled, and it was literally the only way to see changes in her body. Whereas the whole other majority of my girls, actually everyone else of my girls, I give them a moderate carb approach because they can actually adhere to it a lot more. So don't do shit you can't adhere to pretty much. And I really want to end on one really big but easy topic. And that's how you live. Like, I want this whole thing to be how you literally cannot fuck it up, because if you know that if you can put the basics onto a plate, put the basics into your lifestyle, it is actually it's fail proof. How can someone get and keep a lean body and maintain their results even without tracking food? Like the fail proof approach. And especially because I love the way that you mentioned how you make your meals. It's not so much how you make the meals, but there are other ways to prep. Like you can just prep all of your meats, leave them all together, prep all of your carbs, leave them all together, and then create whatever the fuck you want during the week. I'm going to take some rice from here this week. I'm going to take my, the way that I used to prep like chicken, kangaroo, tuna. I didn't have to prep tuna. I had tuna cans and fish. They're the only 3 sources of protein I really like. And then I had egg whites. But I would prep them in certain numbers. I'd write it on the bag, shove them in the freezer. Protein, done. Carbs, I would have my potatoes. I'd have my pumpkin. I'd have my rice. There were the 3 different carb sources I picked, aside from my oats and my cereal. So I would pick what I wanted out of those whenever I wanted, but they were put into their portions already there. So I could pick, okay, so for this meal, I feel like taking this rice. I would move it around. Like I would plan ahead. So my first thing that I want to touch on before I pass it on to you is you need to plan your meals, and planning is not the same as tracking. Plan ahead for what you want to do, because then you're not going to be left over to last minute changes and then realize all of a sudden the whole week's effort was actually making you further away from your goal.
I usually tell people, understand how many meals a day you're going to eat. Once you understand how many meals a day you're going to eat, you can actually do some simple math and understand that I don't want you prepping Sunday for the rest of the week, because A, things might go bad, and B, you're probably going to get sick of the same shit all week long. So it's easy enough to get starches and carbs. It's easy enough to get fats. What are we usually lacking? Protein. So go to the grocery store or get groceries delivered a few times, 2 to 3 times a week at a minimum. That way you can keep that option available to you depending on what you feel like eating. So maybe Monday through Wednesday, you're eating beef. Maybe Wednesday night through Friday afternoon, you're eating fish. And maybe on the weekend, you're running over to the grocery store and grabbing something else. That way, at least now it's understood how many meals a day you're going to eat. You understand how much to prepare at each prep sitting, and it doesn't have to take a long time. And if you understand what portion sizes you need based on your corresponding protein needs, it becomes very easy, and it becomes something that's very easy to track if you want to track. And that way you take all the guesswork out of it. But this idea that I had to grab something and it was bad, you had to grab something because you didn't have something available because you chose not to prep it. So understand that if you're prepared, you should not have any excuses. You should not have any failures because it's already in the fridge. It's up to you to just grab it and eat it, or take it with you in the car. They make coolers now. I don't know if people know that. You can put food into coolers. It's okay to eat out of a plastic container with a fork. Half the places you go have microwaves. If you have to be that person who runs out of a meeting to go grab their food and run back into the meeting, so be it. It's your life, it's your body. And this idea that I'm going to inconvenience somebody with my eating habits is bullshit. I make time for my meals because I know how important they are to me. So if that means that I have to schedule clients around my eating time, if I have to schedule appointments around my eating time, so be it. If it's absolutely extenuating and I can't do it, then I work around it. But food has to become a priority.
I want to really reinforce this because people are going to be like, yeah, well, I'm not you. Yeah, well, I have a life. Yeah, well, I have a family. But he actually raises a really important point, because the thing is, yeah, okay, you can eat the biscuits, you can eat the cookies, you can eat whatever there. But how are you going to feel after that? What's your mindset going to be like after that? How are you going to feel at nighttime? How are you going to feel the next day? Are you going to come to me saying, oh, I fucked up. Oh, I feel like shit. How much damage have I done? Blah, blah, blah. Your choices. Like, you have the power to make your choices. I am not going to be taking my container to a restaurant. But if I was in a meeting, yeah, I will freaking take it because I will get ravenous. If I am not someone that can extend my non-eating window a few hours and know that I can still make a good choice after, I am going to eat in that meeting with my container, because once upon a time, I could not sustain that. Now I can go ages without eating, and I know that I'm still going to make a really good choice. But I've realized I would still not want to do that, even though I can, because my blood sugar levels are going to be shit, which is why I reckon regular meals are actually the best thing you can do, because I would still grab my container and I eat that. But I feel like a bottomless pit if I go ages without eating. And that's something to keep in mind as well. If you're someone who's binge eating at night, overeating at night, emotionally eating at night, and you're not eating stable meals with protein and fiber that keep your blood sugars level through the week, you're going to overeat, even on good food. Because if I go that long, I actually eat 2 of my meals, which are about 500, 600 calories each, one after the other. And I just had 1,000 calories in one sitting. And I would still feel like I could eat more even though my stomach was full, because my brain has not yet got that satiety. So there is actually, like, I'm saying my numbers so you realize that I can eat 1,000 calories over in one meal of actual food, rice, potato, a lot of chicken. a lot of cheese in that meal, and I can still probably eat more.
And that's a lot. That's dense, very voluminous food.
Yeah. And that goes to show what can happen if you're going a whole day without eating because you don't want to inconvenience someone. Because that biscuit, even if you just eat a biscuit, is going to do jack shit. And if you're going in that restricted mindset of, no, I really need to just lose these pounds, I'm not going to eat this much, then I can have this at the end, you're going to eat way more than you originally were going to eat.
Yeah, you grab and go is not a tactic that's going to work long term, because grab and go is usually going to be void of nutrients and it's going to be void of the things you need. So if it means that you have to get up and excuse yourself and go grab your food and microwave it for 30 seconds, I don't think you're going to be reprimanded and fired. And I don't think that if you're somebody who travels for work, packing your food with you, or if you're somebody who stays at hotels often, making sure that you do some due diligence and find out what restaurants are around, or if there's grocery stores around, or get hotel rooms that have refrigerators. There's all sorts of ways to plan ahead. It's just most people that are average don't give a shit enough to make those decisions. So they're always left grabbing and going, and the stuff that's available for grab and go is not good. But for me, when I get on a plane, I get on a plane with tuna packets and granola. And when I get to my destination, I make sure that there's a refrigerator. And if I'm renting a car or I have access to Uber, you can get to the grocery store. There's ways to do it. It's just you're choosing not to do it that way. You're choosing to be a victim of your situation as opposed to controlling your situation. And that's really what it comes down to. I care enough about my goals, my body, and my aesthetics and my performance that I want to be able to live my life conducive to those things. I'm not going to let other shit get in the way. Every once in a while, I give myself a break. That's how I live. If I chose to have children, you better believe I would work around having my children around, because guess what? Your children see what you do and see how you eat, and they're going to pick up either your good habits or your dog shit habits. So this idea that, my kids love junk food and there's always junk food in the house, your kid's not getting on his bicycle and going to the grocery store. You are. So if you're the parent, shame on you for stocking your fridge with bullshit that your kid's going to eat. So it's not your kid's fault that he wants junk food or she wants junk food. It's your fault that they want that, because that's what you buy. I had no option for junk food in my house because my parents didn't have it. I grew up poor as shit. I grew up with whatever my parents were able to make that night for dinner. So that's what I ate. There wasn't cookies and crackers and soda and chips and burgers and pizza, because we couldn't afford any of that shit. My parents made whatever they were able to make: a protein source, a starch source, and a vegetable, because that's what we were able to have. So I'm at a point in my career now where, yes, my job is to meet you halfway, but my job is to also convince you and show you that you're lying to yourself. You're lying to yourself because you've been telling yourself that these things are impossible. But I know I have a mother of 4 that I work with who's got a full-time job. She has 100 employees. All of her kids are home. She's got 4 dogs, 2 that are basically on their last leg that she has to mouth feed. And she still works out 6 days a week, and she still makes every single one of her meals. So if she can do it, why can't you? And that's the thing that you have to ask yourself: how much bullshit am I selling myself? And at some point, if you truly want to become the architect of your own life and you truly want to make a difference in your own life, you have to either be uncomfortable making those decisions, or you have to be uncomfortable feeling like shit. Choose one.
I want to read out one thing that you said, because I saved this one too. Your tolerance to discomfort will dictate how much you succeed with nutrition and fitness. Both require you to be uncomfortable, whether it's pushing till exhaustion with heavy weight and perfect form at the gym, or sacrificing momentarily, like literally momentary. It's not like all the time, but momentary pleasures by not eating certain foods may trigger overeating. Either way, and cliche as hell, but get comfortable with being uncomfortable, or get comfortable with looking and feeling how you currently do, which, as you said, is a sum of your habits.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad that we live in a time where mediocrity has gotten to be okay. and optimization is something that we don't really focus on. The medical community is not trying to optimize. The athletic community is not trying to optimize. Kids' sports are not being optimized. Work's not being optimized. We live in this world where it's just, well, I'm black, everything's, I don't want to live like that. I have one shot. You know, if COVID is how I die, I want to know that I lived a full life. If I get hit by a bus or die in a plane crash, I want to know that I lived the life that I dictated to be my best life. So if you want to walk around and feel and look like shit, that's on you. But if you truly want to make a change in your own life, just understand that you control all of those variables. I don't care how much you think you're not in control of them. I promise you, you are. And the only reason why you don't is because you don't think about it and it's not important enough to you. So if it becomes as important to you as your children, as your relationship, as your ability to earn a living, you'll make time for it. I promise you. You make time for everything else, so you can make time for this. It's just not that important to you.
I love talking to you so much. I wanted to just touch on that part too. The thing is, so many people don't realize how important it actually is to them because they don't really know what they freaking want. They think they want something and then they change their mind and then they change their mind because they're not allowing themselves to stop lying to themselves. Like, get clear on why you want these goals. Like, you want to feel good. You want to be a role model for your kids because, like you said as well, you actually care about your body. You care about yourself, your performance, your gut health. You care about how you feel. So you act accordingly to that. But food is emotional as well, which is why we take the 85 to 90% approach, which is what we both said. Make most of your meals 85 to 90% of your meals simple damn meals. And then plan ahead as much as you can for the deviances, like actually plan ahead in selecting what you allow into your environment. And then choosing at the time, what can I fit in with my day? You can't fuck that up. That's one really good point. I'll let you do 2 more points that fail-proof ways to actually keeping results that don't involve tracking.
Never go more than 3 days without a workout. That's my personal rule for myself, and I tell that to my clients. And never spend an entire day on your ass.
Wow. I love that last one. Like, never spend an entire day on your ass. I love that one. So,
I mean, I used to be a big drinker in my 20s, and I used to be hungover for, you know, at least an entire Sunday, and I would spend the entire Sunday on my ass. And then Monday would come rolling around and I'd have no energy. And then maybe by Tuesday, I'd start to feel a little better, but not really. And then maybe by Wednesday, I'd feel like myself. So basically my decision-making on Saturday led to me losing 4 days of my life. I don't have that much time here. So I don't want to lose days. I don't want to feel like shit. If every once in a while an event comes up and you decide to go and enjoy it and imbibe and you have to go spend 1 day on a couch, just make sure every once in a while you get up, you get moving, you put some water down your gullet and you try to get yourself moving to some extent, but don't live a sedentary lifestyle. There's a reason why all these devices exist now, to remind you to get up and move. And it's sad that we have to be there, but they exist, so use them. Track your steps, give yourself a framework of how much and how often you want to move. But don't go more than 3 days without some level of exercise, and don't spend an entire day on your back unless you're sick.
You got me teary for some good reason when you said that about missing days of your life. You actually got me teary when you said missing days of your life, because so many people literally miss out on life just because they don't have the confidence to show the fuck up. They are so like they're pulled in to what the scale says. They're pulled into what their body looks like. They are just so consumed by the outcome they want to get that they are literally losing days of their life. Like, you are so tunnel visioned, you're not allowing yourself to live life. And it's like binge drinking and lying around. It is literally the same effect. Like, you said yourself, you felt shit about yourself. You had no energy. You missed days. You didn't want to do anything. And that is how people feel when they have a bad meal, as they call it, when they step on the scale and it ruins their mood, and then they go emotionally eating. Like, it's sad that so many people live their lives that way. Ask yourself, do you really want to live the rest of your life that way? It's like, I like it to what Aram just said about being like his drinking nights. The decisions you make have consequences, and deciding to live your life hating your body, not being confident, not stepping up, not actually just biting the bullet and actually being out there. Why? Like, why are you not living life to its fullest? Why? And I think that's a really good place to leave the podcast. I highly suggest following him. I'm going to leave his Instagram handle at the top. It's at 4 weeks to beach.
To the beach.
To the beach. 4 weeks to the beach. There we go. And it's the number 4 and it's the number 2. And I highly suggest you actually look at some of the bold claims that he puts out, so that you guys realize that it really is as simple as you allow it to be. So thank you for coming on. And we went on for ages, but it was full of gold. And I hope you all like this podcast. If you liked it, please share it and tag us both, or let me know how it helped you. And if you have any other questions, thank you.
Thank you.